Hi, and welcome to September's mid-year block of the month. It is the last one. This is month 12, so you have made it. So this month's block is very interesting. It's something that we've never done before. It uses bias tape to make shapes. It was a lot of fun. In your kit, you are going to get two fabrics this month. A dark green 9 1/4 by 9 1/4 and a light green 8 by 8. Included is also going to be a template sheet. So the first thing that we're going to do is cut out the green and the green shapes actually. On your template sheet, you're going to see that you have one template for the bias tape design and another template for the shapes that we're going to make. And you'll notice it says that these are only 1/4 of the shape that you need. So you can handle that two ways. You can either take these shapes and copy it 3 more times and make yourself a full template, or you can fold your fabric and just use the 1/4 size of the template. So that's what I did, so I'm going to show you how you do that. I would just fold the fabric very carefully in half, and I would place the corner, just like you're making paper snowflakes, in the corner of the fold. And I would take my friction pen and I just draw along the edge, and then I just take a pair of scissors and cut. So the first shape that you get is a circle. So the next thing that you're going to do is fold your background fabric so that you have placement lines, and you will have placement lines on your circle. You're just going to line that up, line those lines up so it's centered, and then you're going to sew that down. I used my blind hem stitch foot. So the reason I love this foot to do work like this is because you can put that center bar right along the edge of your shape and adjust your needle to the left-hand side so it makes this nice even stitch for you around your shape. After you get done sewing on your circle, you want to cut away the back of the fabric this time. I know a lot of times when we do applique, most of us leave our back on, but since we're going to be doing multiple layers, it's really a great idea just to cut your back away. To do that, make sure you pull your two pieces apart, snip a little hole, and then you're just going to take your scissors and work it in between. And I'm going to work my way to the edge, and you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch. So we're just going to go ahead and trim out that circle. Okay, so you can see that removes a lot of the bulk from your piece. So now we need the light green shape. So you can still use your 1/4. All you're going to do is cut out the next shape. So just cut on the line here, and you'll be ready to do your next shape. So I've folded my light green square in 1/4s, and you can see this is the fold point right here. So I'm going to place my shape right in that corner. Like I said, just like I was making snowflakes. I want to make sure that my edges are pretty accurate. And I'm going to draw my shape on. Then I'm going to take my scissors and just give it a cut. If you are a really confident rotary cutter, you could rotary cut that. So there's our green shape. You can see because I folded the fabric in 4, I'm going to have those placement lines already. I'm just going to take it over to my piece and I'm going to pin it down and sew around it. As you can see, I have pinned my piece pretty heavily because I don't want it to move. I have my blind hem stitch foot on the machine, and that bar is riding right along the edge of my shape. Before I start sewing, I'm going to adjust my needle to the left. So I'm just going to move it over pretty far because I want to make sure that I'm able to go around the piece. And then it's just a matter of stitching around your piece. Okay, so your shape is stitched on. Again, we are going to cut out the back of the shape and reduce some of that bulk. So again, I'm going to cut the bulk off the back. So I'm going to cut the dark green fabric away from the light green. So I'm just going to follow my stitch line. I know I should have used different threads so you could see my shape. You'll just have to take it from me that I'm cutting right along the edge just like I did with a circle. And I'm taking away some of that bulk on the back. Okay, so now we're ready for the fun to begin. The next thing that we're going to do is cut bias strips. So if you have the salvage left on your fabric, it's really easy to do. You're going to take the 45-degree mark on your ruler and line it up along the edge of your fabric. I try to get the longest strip that I can with the amount of fabric that I have. So with this fabric, it looks like that's going to be my longest strip here. So since my ruler reaches from end to end, I can just go ahead and cut that. And now I have 2 pieces to cut from. So you can see this is the biased edge right here. So now all I have to do is cut strips from it. So I gave you, I'm actually going to hold my fabric this way so it fits on the mat. I gave you in your instructions a square amount of fabric that if you cut it, you would have enough bias strips to make the block. That being said, you do not have to use those dimensions. If you have a longer piece, the longer your bias strip is, the more or the less strips that you'll have to use. So I had to give you some kind of estimation on fabric. So use what you have. And you're going to cut your bias strips 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to line up my ruler at 3/4 of an inch, and I'm just going to start cutting bias strips. So like I said, just continue to cut bias strips until you think you have enough. What happens if you're trying to use a piece of fabric that does not have your selvage on it? So the way that you tell which way you're going to cut it is when I pull this fabric this way, you can see it. It has a minimum amount of stretch. That is your straight of grain. So if this still had your selvage edge on it, the selvage would be running here. You see, if I stretch the fabric this way, it has give to it. So that's going to be the cross grain of the fabric. So again, I would put the straight of the grain on my belly, and I would use my 45-degree mark on my ruler, and I would line it up along the edge of the fabric. And I would draw my diagonal. You can also turn your ruler around so you get a longer run. And there's my 45. And I would just cut again. This is the beginning. I would have 2 ends, and I would just continue to cut the bias strips. Okay, so after you've cut your bias strip, now we're going to use a bias tape maker. This one is by Clover, and it actually allows you to use an adhesive tape with it, which is really cool because you'll end up with bias strips that have an adhesive on it. So the way that this little gadget works is I'm going to run the adhesive tape with the adhesive side down through that little hole right there in the back. And it runs along that channel. And I'm going to slip it underneath the little metal bar so it comes out the front. So the next thing that you do is you take your bias strip that you made, and you're going to insert it into the maker. And you'll notice that the maker has this gap in it. You can take a pin or an awl, and you're going to scoot the fabric out to the top of it where it meets the tape. All right, so at this point, I'm going to flip it over so that the tape is on the top and the fabric's on the bottom. And I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to stab both the fabric and the tape. Then I'm going to take my iron and just with the tip of it, I'm going to get it started. You're going to actually let your iron push the little tape maker. And your job at this point is just to make sure that the fabric's going in even and that the tape is being even. Alright, so you can see I now have a bias piece with an adhesive back on it. So you're going to do that for all the bias strips that you cut. My suggestion would be that you cut some bias, and if you need more, you work your way through it. And now the fun begins. So the next thing we're going to do is use this part of the template. And I actually copied this 3 more times, and I made myself a large template. I'm going to keep that on my ironing board, and I'm going to take our piece and I'm going to lay it down. So I'm just going to use the circle as a guide. So you can see here is the circle. And all as you really need for this one is the reference of these points coming off, because you're going to use this shape to lay your bias strip. So it's a great idea at this point to keep with you a picture of what the shape is going to look like at the end. So working off your little pattern here, all as we're going to do is start. I'm going to start right in that spot right there, because you can see that is an under. So I'm going to take my strip that has the biased edge on it, and I'm going to peel off the paper, which is going to leave that really nice little adhesive spot on the back. So I'm just going to peel that away. So just pull that off and you're going to be left with the adhesive on the bottom. I'm going to start myself a clean edge. So I'm just going to cut my tape. And I'm going to start at an under. And as we go, you will see. So I'm going to put my bias tape along the circle, and I'm going to put a pin in it. And the way that the shape works is I'm going to come around that circle and follow it. So I'm going to come from there, and I'm going to use my shape here. I'm going to come over, and I'm just going to put my tape like that. So at this point, I'm just going to pin around the shape. I can keep on going. I'm going to follow the shape around. It's going to come all the way along here and over and out to the point. So I'm just going to follow the shape around. And every so often, I'm going to pop a pin in to hold the tape in place. Because we made it on the bias, it's going to bend really nicely and keep its shape. When I come to a point like this, I'm going to just do a little kind of fold and keep going. Alright, so you can see that bias strip took me all the way to here. I am not going to press this down because the way you make your piece look really cool is by going over and under and following an over and under pattern. As you lay more strips, you'll see what I mean. So I'm going to take another piece of the bias. And I'm going to trim this off. Actually, I'm going to leave that there until I'm done, and I'll come back and trim everything. So from here, I'm just going to catch the same pin, and I'm going to continue. I don't actually care about that piece. I'm just going to continue working my way around the pattern. So you can see it comes off that loop, and I'm going to come up and around. So just keep following the pattern and pinning it in place. Okay, so now that I have the bias pretty much pinned, I want to look at the weaving pattern because that's really what makes this block look nice. I had very long bias strips, so I might have to unpin at certain areas and rework it, because what I want my pattern to look like is, if I start under here, so the circle is going to come here, and if that is going to be an under, this one will be an over. So the bias So I'm going to pull this pin and weave this yellow one under. And I'm going to continue around the circle. I'm going to pin my strip as I go. So this next one I would go over. So you just have to keep on pinning and moving your strips to weave that over-under pattern. Once you get your piece where you're happy with your weaving that you've done, and you've trimmed all your connection pieces, once I've made sure that this was going to be an over, I'm going to come to this point and I'm going to trim all my pieces right here. So, and hide all that ending underneath the yellow strip. So once you've got your piece where you're happy and everything looks the way you want it to look, you're just going to come along with your iron and you're going to fuse all those pieces down. So after you've snipped all your endings, you're happy with your weaving, you just press, and your bias strip, because it has the adhesive on the back, is going to stick. After you get to that point, the last step is just to stitch around your bias binding pieces. So you can see I stitched very close to the edge on each side. I used invisible thread, so I'm not sure if you can actually see that. But take my word, I stitched each side, and I used, once again, the blind hem foot on my machine. So I could ride that bar nice and close to my shapes and move my needle to the left so I can get that very close little stitch. So it's a really fun, interesting technique. You can do all kinds of things once you've learned how the bias works. On applique quilts, you'll see that big vine that runs along the side. You can spell words. You can do a lot of cool things with it. It was very fun to do. A little time consuming, so leave yourself time, but I was surprised how once I made my bias tape, how quickly it went after that point. So I hope you enjoy the last block of the month. If you would like to order the Clover bias tape maker, give us a call. We're going to be placing an order and getting them in. There are ways where you don't have to use a bias tape maker. If you don't want to buy a bias tape maker, you'll have to go online. It's called the tube method. But this way is a lot easier. So like I said before, if you send me a picture of all 12 of your blocks completed by the end of September, they don't have to be in a quilt, they just have to be constructed, you will get a free gift from me. Again, you can snap a picture of all 12 of them and send them to Cheryl, close to home, @yahoo.com. If you have any questions, I'm here. Give me a call or pop in and see me. See you, everyone.